in this part of CS3201, we will be discussing about nonlinear data structures. Uh, Today's class, I will be investing some time on briefing some concepts that we have already discussed in CS3101, just to give you another feel of where these concepts will be needed in this course. In this course means in this 3201. So first of all, some administrative details. So this is my email ID, as you already can can search in your Google in your the G Suite package. If you want to send some emails that concerns all the participants, please send the email to this course. Sorry, it should be 3201. So please send the email to this email ID. And if you want to have a quick response in a word or two, you may send a message in my phone number. And if you want to discuss something in more elaborative way, or if you are finding something finding some difficulties understanding some concepts, you can drop me an email and we can schedule either a meeting or a call. This is my phone number. You can note it down. A disclaimer for any online courses, I guess. So connection drop can happen in between. I have multiple connections at my end. If one connection drops, I will be joining using another connection. But please be there, stay there in the meet. I'll be coming back within a minute or two. Now the expectation from the classes from my side to you. So all classes will be recorded, of course, and all materials, that is the slides and the codes that we will be writing during the class, will also be shared. But I will prefer, I will advise you to keep a pen and a paper nearby just to take notes if possible, time to time. It will help you to understand the concept in a better way afterwards. And also I will I will request you to attend the live classes rather than listening to the recordings. It's an expectation from my side to you to please try to attend the live classes. And because basically I will expect an interactive class, because I will be asking you question and you will be asking me question. It should be it should be a two-way process. And if you feel like, if you are feeling shy of asking any question, please don't do that. But if you still not convinced enough to ask your question, whether it's maybe you're feeling that the question is too silly or too trivial, you can send me the question over email or send me the question over messages as well. And language is of course not a bar. If you are comfortable in either English, Bangla or Hindi, you can ask your question in these languages. So in this part of the course, I will be mostly following these 4 books. Introduction to Algorithms is a very nice book. I hope you have already went through this book while the previous course, that is CS 3101. Also, these 2 books I have recently came across, basically this second book, which is a very nice one. I'll be giving some problems from these books, which actually contains many nice problems. Other than that, if you want to have a reference for actually understanding the concepts that we will be teaching in this course, using a book, this third book is a very nice one. And fourth book is again a very nice one in general for data structures. So for coding during the class, I will be using ID called Genie. But feel free, if you are using any other ID, it's not a problem. But I will be using this Genie ID to write programs and to show you some outputs as well. So far in this course, like so far means including CS3101, we have discussed about built-in data types. We have discussed about a little bit about user-defined data types as well. We use the concept of structures to define this user-defined or abstract data types. And using structure, we have looked at how to define a structure and how to access the members of a structure. We, of course, discussed about different operations with abstract data types, or ADTs in short. That is stack or queue or arrays that we have already discussed. Specifically, we have concentrated using this queue data structure as well as stack data structure. Other than that, we have also looked at another set of data structures that is called linked list. In linked list, we have looked at single linked list and doubly linked list, how to implement them, how to add items, how to delete items, how to display them, and so on. So built-in data types. So there are basically 5 basic built-in data types. These are the 4 data types, that is 2 integer data types, long int and short int, 2 floating type of data types, one is float and another is double, and another data type is character data type, that is char. But I have mentioned here 5 data types. Can you say what is the data type that I am missing here? Anyone? It's a basic data type, which is also called primitive data type. So it is a void data type. It is basically a valueless data type which have some special purposes associated with it. So this is the example of the 4 data types from here to here. Some examples on how to write codes, how to declare them, and how to initialize them, and so on. So the advantage of using these primitive data types they are actually very simple. I mean, all the operations are already defined. We just need to declare them. Basically, we just need to declare a variable with that associated data type, and we can use them. Of course, it is very easy to handle because the compiler is actually taking care of the libc, the C library is actually taking care of all the memory allocation thing, memory allocation related operations, as well as the operations associated with the corresponding data types. These are already built in the C library. But the disadvantages are, actually there are multiple disadvantages. Here are some. So the most important disadvantage is there is a need for storing and handling variety of data types. For example, if we want to store, for example, an image. So an image is basically a 2-dimensional. You can consider it as an array, and using that, and also it corresponds to some dimensions as well. So directly using these primitive data types, we cannot actually represent one image. Also consider this example of a date. So a date corresponding to 3 components: day, month, and year. So all of them are integer data types, but together these 3 integer components, we can actually refer to a date. So basically, date is a set of 3 integer data types. So as you can understand, we cannot directly use the 3 data types, the 3 variables associated with day, month, and year. We need to have, for better handling, we need to have a single data type which can kind of handle the dates properly, that will be consisting of these 3 components. Along with that, another example is location. So for location, I am referring to the latitude, longitude location. So basically, the geographical location consists of 2, again, floating type components, latitude and longitude. So again, the location is consisting of 2 floating type data type, floating type variable, you can say, which respectively will be corresponding to the latitude and the location, longitude of the location. Another limitation is the limited range. So can you say what is associated, what is the problem with this limited range? Anyone? why am I concerned with this limited range? So let me show you one code. Yeah, this one. So I hope you can see my screen. I mean, see my this coding part. So here I have declared one integer I that is taking a large value. So those of you who are actually familiar with, I mean, who have actually written a number of codes will be able to understand what this value is. So here I am just printing the value of I, and afterwards I am just incrementing the value of I and then again printing the value of I. So can anyone say what will be the output? What will be the output of, I mean, what will be the output here and what will be the output here? Anyone, please. Achha, okay. So if I execute this, you can see here the output is as expected 2147483647, 2147483647. But after incrementing the value by 1, it has become minus 2147483648. Can anyone say what is the reason behind this? So basically there is a range, defined range for an integer number. So this is the maximum one integer variable can contain in C, particularly in the GCC compile, the C defined, the integer data types defined in GCC compiler. So it is actually taking 4 bytes. So this is the maximum it can consider taking as a positive value. So after, if you increment it, it will be giving you an erroneous output. So this is the problem with defining with the primitive data types. So another question to you. So can you immediately tell me what will be the problem with this having this integer? Can you please give me one example where this range will be needed? I mean, range will be actually uh, something of some amount of concern. Okay, so let me show you another. Yes, question or answer. Anyone?
So if there is say a loop where we need to go for a large number and if we give
Correct.
the condition.
Very nice. Yes. So I'll be showing you another example. So here, so you can see in this code, I am taking one integer as input, and then I'm just I'm just computing the factorial of that number. So I hope all of you must have written this code at some point of time. So this is a recursive function. So now if I execute this, you can see if I give an input, say 5, it will be giving me 120. So if I give it 10, sorry, if I give it 10, so you can see the corresponding factorial is getting printed. But if I give, say, some input, say 19, it is also giving me. So you can see factorial of 29 is the output, the produced output you can see is a negative number. It's actually a wrong number. So what I am doing in this code is, here I am multiplying. So basically this function, which is actually computing the factorial of a given number, is actually multiplying the individual numbers. If the input is n, so it is starting from n, multiplying it with n minus 1, then n minus 2 up to 1. So after each multiplication, the value contained in this in this returned statement from this function is gradually, actually exponentially incrementing, and soon it will be over. There will be an overflow, that is the range up to which it can store, and the value that we are actually wanting it to store. So this is a problem with the range, with basically the range of a primitive data type. All right. So of course, another is waste of memory, because if we want to use, say, want to store the marks of students, we can declare one short int, but still short int will be containing much larger value than it is expected to be storing there. So the marks will be at most will containing, say, 100, but the short will be storing some values more than, I mean, much more than 100. Of course, there is no flexibility, because the data type, the primitive data types are already defined, and the corresponding associated operations are also defined. So it's not actually flexible. So if I declare, I mean, if I consider a date, so corresponding to, I mean, consisting of day, month, and year, there is no, I mean, primitive operations using which we can compute the difference between 2 days, 2 dates. You can understand that. And also error prone problem. So this is one example of this error prone problem. So if this output is kind of a positive one, we will be, might be getting a false impression. So for 30, you can see it's a positive output, but it is not, it is actually a wrong output. I mean, it's not a right, correct answer. So if we, I mean, if we kind of overlooked this, because 30, the last digit at least should be a 0, at least. I mean, there will be multiple zeros at the end of the result. But I mean, if we kind of overlook this, we might be getting the, I mean, we might be getting using the wrong output produced by the program. So for these reasons, and also there are some other reasons as well, which are kind of the disadvantages of the primitive data types. So for these reasons, we will be using, we need to use, I mean, we need to define our use, I mean, some data types that we will be using for our purposes. And these user defined data types are also called abstract data types. So some examples are, so for example, time. We can define a time abstract data type that will be consisting of 3 integer values, second, minute, and hour associated, I mean, corresponding to the second of the, I mean, the second component, the minute component, and the hour component. Date as well, 3 integers. Location, 2 floats. Complex, this can be integers as well as float. 2 components, real component and an imaginary component. A book will be consisting of, say, here I'm only referring to 4 components here. Title, which will be a character array, basically string. Author, which will be again a character array, string. Price, it can be either float or integer. Date of publication, it can be just the year, that is date of publication in year. In that case, it will be an integer. But if we want to store the exact date in which the book has been published, this DOP will be a type of this date abstract data type. Also for student info, name will be a string, roll number will be an integer, and date of birth will be again a variable of this date data type. There are multiple other examples, but these are some of them. So formally, an abstract data type is just an abstraction of some data structures, and it is associated with 3 components, specifically 3 components. First component is the data stored. Second component is the operations on the data. This will be defined. And the third component is the error conditions, or how to handle the errors during, I mean, computing, during execution of the operations. So far in this course, like in CS 3101, we have discussed about array abstract data type, stack abstract data type, and queue abstract data type. All of them are linear ADTs. So ADT is the short form of abstract data type, as you can understand. So all of them are linear. Linear in the sense, in the memory, they will be taking the same strip of memory. So, I mean, if we consider stack, using linked list, that is not the case actually. But for say array, so I mean the array implementation of stack or queue, it will be taking the linear, the memory allocation will be in the linear fashion. So that's why it is, that is the one reason that these are called linear ADTs. Another reason is we cannot, I mean, the operations associated with array and stack or queue will be linear. So for stack, as you can remember, we can only access the elements from the top. We cannot directly jump to some elements in the middle. For queues as well, there were 2 pointers, as you can remember. One is front and one is rear. So the insertion will be from the front end, and the rear, the deletion will be happening from the rear end. So we cannot jump to some other statement, I mean, jump to some middle position when we can access access the elements stored in these ADTs. So that's why they are called linear abstract data types. So in this part of the course, we will be discussing one non-linear abstract data type, that is called tree. So a way of implementing the tree is using structures. So yeah, first of all, first question is why these are called abstract. So I think all of you have done the course on Python, the CS 1101. So this is a code snippet from Python. So here I am defining one list consisting of 6 integers. I am calling it as primes. It consists of 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. I am expecting to store only the prime numbers in this list. But as you can see, 9 is not actually a prime number. So I want to remove it. So there is an associated function operation. I mean, in programming term, it is called function. So this remove function, given the value, it will be removing the item from this list. So, and also if you want to add one new items in this list, there is another function that is defined, that is called append. So this append and remove, which I hope all of you have used at some point of time during writing Python codes, these operations are already defined. So how they are actually defined, how this 13 is getting added at the end, or how this 9 is getting removed when we are calling this remove function, is actually hidden from us. So this is the background that we need to understand about abstraction. So basically we just need to call the function, and we need not to be worried about how they are actually implemented. So why we should use abstract data type? It's a very relevant question that you might be asking. So it's basically to use the already implemented concepts or already implemented modules to be reused by us for some other purposes. So given a string, say, if we need to compute the length, what we can do is, a string will be a character array. So what we need to do is, we need to traverse the array character by character, and for each character we need to increment some counter. At the end of the loop, either for or while, we will be getting the length. But as you can, this is basically implementing the function that is called, you can call it strlen. But I hope you have already used this. There is a library called string.h. So this string.h library, this header file, already contains an implementation of this strlen function. So using this strlen function, which is defined here, we can actually, given a character array that is a string, we can straightforward get the length out of it. So this is one pretty good example on why we should be using abstract data types. Because every time if we start from reinventing the wheel, it will be just a waste of our efforts. So a real life example is the password protection mechanism that is implemented in our mobile, either a smart mobile or any kind of mobile devices. So the same password protecting module can be used to restrict the access of some particular applications, as well as it can also be used to open, while opening the device. So this is one pretty good real life example of where this abstraction of data types or abstraction of here in this case, this is actually an abstraction of operation. This is an example where this abstraction of operations are actually implemented in our real life. So there are basically two ways of defining user defined data types or abstract data types, using structures and using unions. For this course, we will be using structures. So to define and declare a structure, we used, I hope you have followed this kind of mechanism. So this is the name of the structure. This is the keyword struct. This keyword is used to declare a structure. The name of the structure is sname here, and there are multiple members. The members can be any type of primitive data types as well as some other abstract data types as well. So the name, after declaring this, the name of the new data types will be struct sname. So if we want to access, if we want to create one object of this data type, we need to use this notation. We need to use this coding, this code fragment. So struct sname obj. So this statement will be creating one object of this struct sname type of abstract data type. This is actually similar to int a, declaring one integer variable, naming it as a. So here a and this obj are kind of similar, and struct sname and int is kind of associated. So another way is using aliasing, that is called type def. We are defining the type. So type def struct sname. So this struct sname will be type defined to sname. So from this point onwards, after this code has been written, afterwards you can use the name sname, the variable name sname, or not the variable name, sorry, it's an abstract data type name sname straightforward to define one object. Of course, you can also, afterwards, after defining this, you can also use the struct sname like this, but this is a shorthand like aliasing. So this is similar to type defining integer as capital INT. So after, if you use this type def int capital I, capital N, capital T, capital I, capital N, capital T A, and INT, small INT A will be similar. So an abstract data type, or specifically here in structures, a structure will be containing some variables, some member variables, as they are called. So they can be either of primitive data types, they can be pointers, they can be arrays, or they can be other structures as well. So here in this example, I am defining one structure. I'm calling it as complex. I'm naming it as complex, and then I'm defined the two member variables I have declared as of type float. They are called real and image, and I'm type defining, that is aliasing this type def struct complex to complex. I forgot to write it here. So afterwards, I need to while writing our code, that is while writing our main function or writing any other function, we can declare one object simply using the complex keyword. That is complex. Basically it has become a keyword after type defining this struct complex to complex. And to access the corresponding member variables, one way of accessing them is using this dot operator. So these dot operators are also called membership operators. So C1, as we have declared here, C1 as an object of this complex abstract data type. And as you can see, there are two members defined, real and imaginary image. So C1 dot real will be corresponding to the first members defined inside this complex structure, and C1 image will be corresponding to this one. And we can, I mean, this is basically I am defining one abstract one complex object. So basically C1 is 2 plus 3i, and here C2 is basically 4 plus 5i. Now, one question to you. This is one way of accessing the member variables in a structure. So, can you say what is the other way of accessing this? Anyone?
Through its address.
Through its address. Very nice. Yeah. So basically, what we need to do is we need to declare one pointer type variable. So basically here I am just declaring one straightforward variable which is not a pointer. So basically using that pointer we can access this using the arrow operator. We'll be looking at this. So this is an example, the same example. Here I have written one complete code. So let me just briefly write this. All right. So here what I am doing is, so let's comment this out. Okay. So here I am defining the same struct complex consisting of two member variables, real and image. I am type defining it as complex, and I am declaring two variables of this complex data type, abstract data type, which is, and I am taking two integers, I mean two individual inputs from the user. So let me execute this. So I hope you can see my screen. Let me just clear it for you. So here, enter complex number 1. So let's give it an input, say 4 and 5. Enter complex number 2. Again, if I give 4, 5. So essentially, what I am doing is I am defining the same. I am defining two complex data type objects using the same input. So for this input, C1 is 4 plus 5i, C2 is also 4 plus 5i. Now my question to you is how to compare C1 and C2. For this input, you can understand that C1 and C2 are same, isn't it? C1 is also 4 plus 5i, C2 is also 4, I mean, both of them are 4 plus 5i. How to compare them? Anyone? This is the question to you guys. Can we do C1 equals to C2? Anyone? So, I mean, at least please answer this. Can we do this?
Yes,
So we
it
have
will
to
combine all.
We can do this, right?
Yes.
Are you saying this? Oh, okay. Let me try. Okay. C1 equals to C2. So if C1 and C2 are same, I mean, I want to print C1 and C2 are, I mean, I want to print this message. Are you sure this is true? I mean, this we can do. So equals to, achha, okay. Let me compile it. Then you will be seeing. So pardon my font here. So you can see compilation failed. So the reason is invalid operand to binary. Basically, this statement will return one binary output to us, is expected to return some binary output, whether they are same or not. They're basically true or false. But the objects, I mean, the operands associated with this operator equals to operator are given, which is of type complex. So as you can see in the error, invalid operand to binary, equals to have complex, also known as struct complex and complex, as data types, as operands. So we cannot actually do this. So there are two questions associated with this I want to ask you. One is how to do this, how to compare two objects, and the second question is why this is not actually happening. Anyone?
We can,
Yes.
yeah, we can just take the values inside the object and individual compare them.
Correct.
Uh,
So basically what we need to do is we need to do C1 dot real equals to C2 dot real and C1 dot imaginary equals to C2 dot imaginary, then it should be fine. So you can see directory. So it's so compilation finished successfully. The font is I think a little bit small, so it is saying compilation finished successfully. So now if I execute this, so if I give say 5 6 and if I give say again 5 6, you can see C1 and C2 are same. So to compare, we need to compare the individual components, that is individual member variables declared in this structure individually. Now the second question is why this is not the case. Why we cannot do C1 equals to C2? Why we cannot do this? So I will try to briefly say you this. So basically, computer stores structure using the concept that is called word boundary. So if I declare one structure here, so if this structure is corresponding to this real and imaginary part, so the real will be here and the imaginary will be here. So this will be the real and this will be the imaginary. And here in between, there will be a gap, and then this is called slack byte. So for this slack byte, so this is say C1 in this example. In this example, C1 and for C2, there will be another same thing. And for this slack byte, it will be actually although the item stored here will be here say 4, here 5, here 4, here is again 5, but due to this slack byte, it will be giving us it will be actually causing us not to be able to compare C1 equals to C2. So we will be unable to do this. So we'll be unable to do this due to this slack byte. So when we declare a structure variable, each one of them may contain a slack byte, and the values stored in such slack bytes are actually undefined. So here what we are actually storing is not actually defined, like declaring one int a. So int a, and then if I try to print the value of a, it will be giving us some garbage value, or in recent compilers it will be giving us some warning that it is not actually defined, it is not actually initialized. So as this slack byte, this will be containing some unknown values, and due to these slack bytes we will be unable to compare these two objects. All right. Moving ahead. So yeah, so another way of accessing the members in a structure is using this pointer, using the address, that as some of you have told. So this is, so here again I am declaring one structure, I am calling it as point, containing two floating data types. Point P1, here I am using the dot operator, and here I am using the arrow operator using the pointer. So here I am using the malloc function, which is actually allocating a memory in the in our virtual memory space, which is P2, which is pointed by P2, and P2 arrow X and P2 arrow Y will be corresponding to the X and Y, the member variables defined in this point structure. So another very important abstract data type we have used is Q. So it is again a linear data structure, as we have already told. The working principle of Q are the first in, first out. So there are two pointers, front and rear. So from the front end, the items are getting inserted. Extremely sorry. So from the front end, the items will be getting removed. So basically, in this example, I have the input order is 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So as the first input is 10, the front will be pointing to here, and the new insertions will be happening from the rear end. The deletion will be happening in the front end, and the new add and addition of items will be happening from the rear end. So extremely sorry for jumbling this up. Or maybe earlier I have also did this. So basically, from the front end, consider this is a ticket counter. So here the ticket counter will be here. So basically, the first person that came to the ticket counter is 10, then 20. This is basically the queue. So the person, the newly arrived person will be joining this queue at the end, and after this ticket, the person will be leaving from the corresponding operations associated with enqueue or insertion or insert or dequeue or delete or remove. So stack is a very important data structure which we will be using for implementing non-recursive version of recursive algorithms. So for again, stack is another linear data structure. The working principle is different. It is last in, first out. So the item that is inserted at the last, at the latest item that is inserted will be removed at the beginning. So there is one stack pointer, one pointer associated with stack. Strictly associated with stack is called top, which will be pointing to the last inserted item. Here the insertion order is different. The first 50 is inserted, then 40, then 30, then 20, then 10. The top is in stack terminology that is called pop. If you want to pop an item, this 10 will be getting popped. So one very useful application in terms of computer science is development of recursion inside our memory, inside our virtual memory, or inside in the computer virtual space. So earlier we have I have actually told you that there are three specific things associated with any abstract data type. One is data stored. For the stack, it is in data. Second is the operations on the data. That is specifically for stack, it is push and pop, and error conditions associated with operation. So in the stack ADT, it is empty. So before popping an item, we need to check whether it is empty or not. If it is empty, we will be, pop operation should not be allowed. Another very important concept that will be needed for this part of the course while implementing tree is called null pointer. First of all, let me ask you, what is a pointer? Very briefly, can you answer this? Very briefly.
A variable which stores the address of other variables.
Very nice. So basically a variable that holds some memory location or some address of some other variables. And a null pointer, can someone say what is a null pointer?
It doesn't store any address.
That exactly, so that is storing some address which is pointing to nothing. So basically it's a I mean, null pointer will be needed, actually is needed when we want to, I mean, when we do not have any address to store in the beginning, but later on we will be storing some address in some variable. So here in this code snippet, I am defining one pointer, I am calling it as PTR, and I am storing this capital NUL, which is the keyword defined in C library, libc. In libc, this null is defined, which is basically corresponding to this null pointer. So using this, we can avoid memory leaks, and which may contain, I mean, which may cause some memory, I mean, which may cause some application to stop working in between or while starting our operations. So, okay, so another, I mean, the last two concepts that will be needed are singly linked list and doubly linked list. Specifically for implementing the nonlinear data structures, that is tree, pardon, will be the doubly linked list. But let me start with a little bit about singly linked list as well. So this is a singly linked list, which is exactly similar to, as you can see in this stack is defined or this queue is defined. So it is basically containing one start, that is pointing to the starting of the linked list, and here this is actually corresponding to the null pointer. So in this linked list, it consists of 5 nodes. Each node contains two separate components, two separate member variables. One is integer and another is pointer to the same data, to the same node type data structure or data type or abstract data type. So start is pointing to the address of the first node, and this second component will be containing the address of the next component onwards. So to define a singly linked list, this is basically the notation, struct node in data and struct node, and this is basically the pointer component which will be storing the next component, next node in this list. Doubly linked list, there will be two links. So one will be pointing to the left and another will be pointing to the right, and there will be one data part. This data part can be integer, can be float, can be any other structures as well. So the last thing that we will be discussing today is regarding the parameters in a function. So there are basically two types of parameters, I mean two types of naming conventions used to define the parameters. So these are called actual parameters, that is the parameters that are actually passed to the function from the calling function. So here in this example, int main, I am calling this swap function. This a and b are the actual parameters, and the formal parameters, the other names that is used, is associated with the parameters received by the function. So this is the called function swap, and this is the calling function main. So a and b are the actual parameters that is defined in the calling function, and the parameters that is used for receiving the parameters are called formal parameters. So here a and b are formal parameters. So there is a concept called call by value and call by reference. So in this example, I am calling the function this, I redefined the swap function as swap underscore v. V is associated with value. I am passing a and b here. So these formal parameters are these actual parameters are 5 and 10, and here the formal parameters are again a copy of a and 10. But note that the changes made here in this A and B, here basically I am swapping the values of A and B using the third parameter C, variable C. But these changes happening here will not be reflected here as compared to the call by reference example. Here in call by reference, we will be passing the parameters by their address. So here I was passing A and B, but here in call by reference, I am passing the address of A and B. Here I was taking A and B, but here I am taking star A and star B. Basically the values stored in those addresses. So let me show you some examples with that as well. So how they are actually not, I mean, these actually happen. So here again, so here int main, this is the same declaration A and B. So I am calling the swap v here, which is calling this function. So here I am swapping the values. Now if I execute this, so you will be able to see before swapping it is from, I mean, printed from this statement 5 and 10, and after swapping as well it is called by value as it is, I mean, the after swapping still it is containing the same 5 and 10 value. Actually these values are not actually swapped. And if I use the call by reference function calling, then we will be seeing that before swapping this statement is printing 5, A equals to 5, B equals to 10, but after swapping, as we are calling this swap R, which is this function, that is swap using call by reference, as we are passing the address, after swapping you can see the output is A equals to 10 and B equals to 5. So actually the values are getting swapped. So this concept will be needed while discussing about trees, because all the tree operations we will be using this swap call by reference. So I guess the time is already over. So thanks a lot. We will be meeting in the next class. If you have another class, you may switch to that mate. But if you have some question, please feel free to ask me.